Just give me liberty, or give me death.
So with or without me, just to be alive right now, to get to sit at the forefront of human history, to watch it unfold, to be a player in it, to get to, you know, I don't think as individuals we really get to change the forces of nature that drive the human experience, but we do get to decide what side we're going to be pulling on, and we do get to help shape the face of human destiny. And where we are right now in the United States, with the opportunity to fulfill the promise of the first American Revolution, to once again lead the world forward in freedom, is just such an incredible opportunity. I can't imagine doing anything else right now.
Wash away tyranny, open. All right, guys. Hey, it's Kevin O'Neill here from Turn to Liberty down here in Florida. Inviting you all to come on out and meet Adam KoKesh. He's coming to the state of Florida. And we actually have him on this Zoom. Adam, you want to say hello to the folks?
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Kevin. Greatly appreciate this.
My pleasure, sir. Adam and I don't go back too far, but I can say we've met up a couple times. I've heard him speak a few times. And what I really appreciate about Adam is he's thinking outside the box a lot of the times. I mean, for us folks who may have come from a political party and ended up in the liberty movement, you know, we've moved a little bit. Adam's that type of person who helps us move that extra mile. And I appreciate that. So you're coming to Florida. If you could let us know where and when, how we can come out and see you. There's a lot of cities down here. So I know about Tampa, but tell me about what your plan is coming to Florida, Adam.
Well, first, this is the Taxation is Theft Tour. We're doing 68 cities in 3.5 months. It's a really intense tour. We're just over halfway through it right now, speaking to you from Richmond, Virginia, and we are going to be heading south in the next few days here. So I know we've got a few events between here and Florida, but in Florida we're hitting Jacksonville, Tampa, Orlando, Miami, and I think Tallahassee. We just got a debate scheduled between myself and Lauren Southern on government versus private property borders. So I'm really excited about that. And all the details are at our website, thefreedomline.com. If you go to thefreedomline.com, that's 3 words, thefreedomline.com, click on calendar, and you can see all the details for that. We have most of our events are 6 p.m. to 9. And one of the things that we're doing that's different with this tour is we're building ahead for the KoKesh 2020 campaign, is giving people a chance to mingle and you know, really talk about what it means to be an activist and get plugged in with this campaign. So when we go and we have these events, we have them in really fun places. We usually have an open bar, and you know, they're really cool events. We say that it's the freedom family coming together, and you know, oftentimes it feels like that, of the people who, you know, really care enough about this message to show up and help make stuff happen. And that's what we're finding all over this, you know, all over the country on this tour, that people are pretty excited by the possibility of taking down the biggest empire the world has ever known.
What's with you, sir? You got a problem with central governments? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. I also generally have a problem being referred to as sir, because I was a sergeant, which means I worked for a living when I was in the Marine Corps. But yeah, it's the problem of violence, of authority that is illegitimate, exerting control by force, by violence, and that's what government always is. And you're jumping ahead a little bit here, man, but you know, this was one of the major epiphanies for me in waking up, when you know, you think you've got to the bottom of the rabbit hole, when you understand voluntarism, you understand libertarian philosophy, or anarcho-capitalism, if you want to apply that label to it. But there's more always to learn, and we keep shedding ourselves of delusions in this process of, you know, waking up. And one of the ones for me was that we had to wake up everybody, that we had to, you know, if we don't get, you know, a critical mass of the population to understand Austrian business cycle theory and read books about monetary policy, then we're doomed to have government for thousands of years, you know. And it's like, no, that can't be right. You know, we live in a communist country where we have 10 out of 10 of the planks of the Communist Manifesto in action to one degree or another. There was never a vote on that. There was never, hey, America, do you want to be communist? Raise your hand if you want to be communist. Okay, we're communists now. And similarly, for achieving the libertarian social order that we want to see, we don't have to win everybody over philosophically if we can get everybody to take the first steps of localization together, and that is taking governments apart from the top down, getting them down to the community level. So running for president on the platform of dissolving the entire federal government in 2020 is the everybody gets what they want platform. You want government to do this in your state and this in your state, fine. We're not doing the one-size-fits-all solution anymore. Eventually, there are going to be so many people who see that they are happier and freer and more prosperous without the United States federal government, state by state, that they're going to say, give me some more of that. And we're going to dissolve state governments and get government down to the county level. And at that point, if you think about it, as libertarians, we're done. We get to retire. You know, government is down at the county level. It's pretty close to voluntary. I would say then, dare say it's not exactly government anymore, but it's at the point where you can secede on your own property. You know, there's no one stopping you from doing that. No greater central authority. We're done. We get to retire.
Wow, that is a mind-opening idea. And I'm hearing a clicking noise on this video feed. You think the government's watching this right now, Adam?
Oh, well, it could be my mom. I mean, she is my biggest fan, so I don't know.
I was just joking with you. So I understand you want to do like a referendum, a nationwide referendum. Like I suspect people like you and I are familiar with the Convention of the States. And
well, no, it's much simpler than that. We're referring to what we're doing with this campaign as a referendum, because that's what it is. We are putting the existence of the federal government to a national vote, but it's through the authority of the presidential election. And I am running for president in 2020. I'm running for the Libertarian Party nomination, and the platform is to do this with a single executive order. So when we refer to it as a referendum, it's still a referendum in the sense that the executive order itself will be published online. You will see in as much detail as is necessary to make this a legally binding specific document that lays out what happens agency by agency, the entire process of dismantling the federal government. It'll be on the website before the election. The American people will know exactly what they are voting on.
Okay, so most I kind of knock. I guess I want to say I make fun of ourselves, libertarians. We have this utopian idea that we can go back to, like, you know, pre-1913, you know, and operate, you know, as our nation folk.
Oh, I take issue with that. If I may challenge your premise there. You say libertarians and sort of like collectivize us like that, and we really don't like that. But
small L.
but I don't think libertarianism is not about going back. It's about going forward. And libertarianism is very specifically just self-ownership, non-aggression principle, voluntarism that speak to this basic principle of human relationships, that nonviolent relationships are more conducive to human happiness than violent ones. So if you take the kind of Amero Fantasyland version of history, yeah, you might say, oh yeah, back in the day things were better. But no, even with the growth of government, and if I may, as a little aside here, a lot of libertarians fall for this idea that big government is always worse than small government. And it's not true, and I can prove it just very easily. And there's an important insight that comes out of this. Would you rather have a government that's huge and, oh, sorry, am I pronouncing that right? Huge. And it's half the population in this fictional world is government, and they have monopolies on big functions, but they do more or less what the market would provide anyway. They respect people's rights. It's largely nonviolent. It just enforces its monopoly, right? Or would you rather have a government that's tiny, that's 1% of the population, but its policy is to murder every firstborn child?
Well, I would argue there's got to be a third option, of course.
Well, of course, but my point is that sometimes smaller government is worse than bigger government, that the evil of government is not measured by its size, it's measured by its violence and its distortion of the natural state of harmony that would happen without that violence. So a lot of libertarians look at the welfare state and go, oh my God, it's totally bad, totally evil. And I agree that, yeah, it's an evil institution. It's done on an unethical premise. But the fact that we can support so many idle people, we're that productive as a society now and with the same quality of life, like that's a good thing to celebrate. You know, we're doing it wrong, but we've come a long way. So I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt in the middle of the question with all this aside, but yeah, libertarianism, we can definitely say from the definition of it, is not about going backwards or forwards. It presents an ideal that we have never achieved, that we are actually advancing towards.
Sure, no, I definitely agree with that too. What I was getting at was the particulars of the U.S. Constitution, for instance. So that document exists. Executive order can certainly be have a tremendous effect on the spending going on in Washington and the functions that are happening. Obviously, the president can do things like turn off agencies. I mean, they'll exist on paper because there's a piece of paper elsewhere called the law that says this thing is supposed to exist, but it could then be defunded. I guess what I'm getting at is, you're not advocating removing the U.S. Constitution. I think what you're saying is we're just basically going to unplug the whole thing, except for the most basic requirements that the U.S. Constitution specifies. Is that
No. We are invoking the higher authority to the Constitution, which is the Declaration of Independence, which says we have not only a right but a duty to alter or abolish systems of government that no longer serve us. I'm going in as a bankruptcy agent, showing that this agency has been bankrupt, or this institution rather, has been bankrupt for a long time, arguably since the beginning, with an illegitimate business model based on theft. But even by traditional financial analyses, certainly by 1971, divorcing from the gold standard, and at the level of debt to income that the federal government just has as a business now, yeah, it's worse than bankrupt. If it didn't have an army behind it, it wouldn't be sustainable. So no, we are taking all of that away. And is the executive order constitutional? Heck no, of course not. Again, we are appealing to the higher authority. And I mean, I can't remember in my lifetime since we've had a president who actually only wrote constitutional executive orders anyway. So no, we are going in with this executive order declaring the federal government of no authority. The Constitution is of no authority. It is now a custodial agency. I resign from the presidency in this document to be custodian of the federal government. And of course, there's a joke in there somewhere about custodians and politicians, but I don't want to, insult any professional cleaning staff people out there. And what we're talking about is ending up with 50 independent states plus the territories as complete, and the Native American reservations as completely sovereign entities. So every agency of the federal government will have one of three things happen to it. It'll either be liquidated, as in just like it shouldn't exist anymore, like the IRS, it's just done. Or two, it can be localized, so like Department of Transportation, certain welfare functions, things like that, where there are actual physical resources. Really simple, you sign it over to the state governments, now it belongs to the states. Or three, liberated, that is separated, spun off, and I like to use the VA as an example here. I'm a veteran myself, and I stay away from the VA as much as possible. We have 22 veterans committing suicide every day in this country. The VA does not exist to take care of veterans. It exists to make it look like government cares so it can keep convincing people to enlist while paying off its sponsors in the pharmaceutical industry. And what I want to happen with the VA is to see it privatized. And what I mean by that is you spin it off, liberate it from the federal government, liberate it from this violent system of taxation, give it an endowment as you liquidate the federal government, and give every single veteran in America one ownership voting share. And when you put those resources in the hands of veterans, I guarantee you're not going to have 22 veterans committing suicide every day.
So when you say ownership share in what?
Well, it would be the Department of Veterans Affairs, or we might retitle it something else to be the United States agency of Veterans Affairs. You know, it would become something else. But of course, as a private institution, it would then have a charter. You would have a membership requirement of being on the database of the U.S. military, of having served in the United States military at some point, and it would you know, at that point be accountable to veterans directly. And if the veterans want to change the name, you know, if there's a vote, you know, then it's done on that ownership basis.
I like that disposition of property. You got all that property, those buildings, land, and now we're turning it over to, you know, the people that you know, building and systems were to have supported the veterans, and now the veterans are in charge in managing this. So obviously there's healthy veterans who have doctorate degrees and medical degrees who might want to step up, and then you get the ones who are ill and sick that obviously need services from that facility, I should say, and from the new systems that get created. So I mean, that's a make sense solution to that for sure. So I did read you wrong. So this is not a convention of the states type of solution. This is a when you say a higher authority, I suspect you're referring to we the people when you say higher authority.
Well, the authority that is laid out in the Declaration of Independence is the principles that the country was founded on.
I'm thinking about you know, the words tyranny, and you know, when it comes to a time of, you know, when a government becomes tyrannical, you know, we have the right to step up and chart our own course. I can't recite, you know, exactly.
When in the course of human events.
There you go. It's some words are the same. Yes, they're both English. That's probably the position you're standing on when you say what you're saying. Is that correct?
Yes, that it is. This is a system.
A administrative, you know, words on paper revolution, not a shooting revolution.
Of course, yeah, and I say this on every event at the tour, that while the people who are doing this, like you and I, we understand that what we are doing is much more evolutionary than revolutionary, and I touched on this, but that we are living in the most peaceful times in human history. That is really the measure of freedom, the measure of nonviolence that you get to experience in your life. And this is just one step in that process, but it's a pretty darn big one. And sometimes it seems like we've already won. We've already achieved the paradigm shift. People are ready to decentralize. You look at the global secession movement that's happening right now, Catalonia, Kurdistan making headlines, Britain, Scotland, you know, you look all over the world. You've got in the United States, Vermont, New Hampshire, Texas, Colorado's 51st state project, Jefferson State, California wants to secede. So it's almost as if we've already come to this point, and I get to be the one going, hey, can I go, you know, pick up the pieces and clean up the mess and try to get this done in an orderly way. Also, the thing about paying back the creditors, looking at this, you know, I would not feel comfortable doing what I'm doing if there was not a legitimate, moral, free market equivalent of it. It's not, I'm going to go in and be in charge of this violent institution for the purpose of trying to defend freedom. Like, no, I'm not. No, that's not an ethical proposition. And I would say it's actually anti-libertarian, anti-freedom to say, I want to be president so that I can force policy on the entire territory. But because what I'm doing is going in as a bankruptcy agent, what we're doing is paying back the creditors of the United States. And we're not talking about the foreign banks and the foreign governments. No, we are disowning that part of the debt. That debt is not a legitimate debt to be forced upon the American people. In fact, the national debt, the very concept of taking on debt through government that is going to be paid in the future by taxation, which is theft, is intergenerational child abuse to force future generations to pay for things that they never had a say in. So that comes to an end right away. Now, I can't promise how much stuff there's going to be left to give up to the American people, but it is all going back. When we are done liquidating the federal government, the remaining funds will go to Social Security, spun off as a separate institution that will release those funds on a schedule more or less along the lines of what Social Security is currently doing until those funds run out.
I'm thinking timing is going to be critical for you know, your campaign, this idea to get traction. Similar to Catalonia and Brit exit and all these other, smaller places are trying to secede. I honestly think, what you're talking about and the freedom for all these people, for all of us, is tied to the Federal Reserve Bank finally collapsing, finally going banana republic on us, and also at the same time a competing currency that's hopefully commodity backed rolling in on top of that, pretty much at the same time, so we can shift off the Federal Reserve note onto something that's collateralized. Once all these things happen, I think that's what's going to get the voters over the learning curve here to recognize that the fake money system isn't exactly that. It's been propped up. It might have helped at the beginning of the industrial age here, building this country, so to speak. I'm willing to say that when they had those talks, it was all about velocity. How quickly do we want to build America? But now that America's built, the globalists have tried to offshore all the industrial base as fast as they could in the last 20 years. It's because basically if they don't get another sucker at the bottom of this pyramid scheme, the whole thing's going to unravel. So, I mean, your timing might be perfect. It might be 2019. It might be 2019 when the government checks stop getting printed. And as you, I'm sure, are aware, we're basically 2 missed government checks away from total social breakdown in this country. And that's all you would really need, I think, to get some legs. No offense, but to get some legs under your idea.
Sure.
Basically, the government to participate in by not mailing the checks two payment periods in a row, and then basically USA Incorporated is done as we understand it. The fiat currency, the Federal Reserve Bank, is done as we understand it, because people will finally realize this whole thing is paper. This is literally a Weimar Republic, quality banana republic paper, and no one's getting paid. No one's getting paid. Yeah.
Well, hey, before you go on to the question there, if I may get into that, because that is a really important topic, and it is huge for this campaign as well. And I'm glad that you put it in those terms of timing first and thinking about it like that, because this is not an educational campaign. We are running to build a national consensus around the idea that America does not have to be united under one government to be united in American values. And there is a critical paradigm shift that is happening around this. And it may, like I said, it may have happened already, and we're just coming in to bring it into reality. And the question about the monetary system is a really important one. And I'm kind of surprised you didn't ask it to me in the question, Adam, what are you going to do about the Federal Reserve System? Because sometimes the question is put to me that way. And there's a really easy answer in terms of policy. What do we do with the Federal Reserve System if we're dissolving the federal government? Again, I'm not a central planner. That's not the point. And if the American people are still using the dollar in any way when I take office, it would not be within my authority to say, you cannot use the US dollar. It would only be in my authority to spin off the Federal Reserve System, to let it survive as a private institution in the free market, or die what I hope would be a quick, painful, natural death. Painless, I don't care. Painful for the bankers, painless for the American people, and everybody else in the world who depends on these monetary systems. So how soon should we get off the dollar? The perfect libertarian answer is always let the market decide. The real question is, will the dollar still be functional at all when we win with this platform? And if it is, what do we do to manage the transition? And, would we be liquidating the federal government's assets for Bitcoin at that point? Who knows? You mentioned commodity backed, and I understand where you're coming from with that. I would make the case that Bitcoin is backed by the commodity of the computing power and the cryptography that backs up the network that makes everything on it possible as a ledger. That is a backing of value. You could call that a commodity if you want, whatever. Regardless, that because Bitcoin is a proven concept, we have the alternatives already. If the dollar crashed tomorrow, everybody with a smartphone has the new money. There's going to be some upheaval and some readjustment, but we've got that. As long as the internet survives, the free people of the decentralized internet, we figured out the money thing. Sorry, government, we don't need you anymore. And that might be, something that radically changes my platform in terms of the details, because the federal government itself, as you point out, would be radically altered if they just hit that breaking point where they're having trouble delivering checks.
And it's a complete nightmare. I mean, I live in the city of Tampa. It's a city. I think I get paid like every other Friday. One of these Fridays was like the first, second, or third of the month, and I'm like, why is there a giant line going into the bank? And the truth of the matter is, I met all the people who are on government checks. Now, some of these people, were promised Social Security, so they're earners. They earned their check. Other folks, were younger than me. They whatever their deal is, didn't look like they earned their check. But obviously they're getting subsidies, and that's the revolution. It's a uneducated, ugly revolution. But when those two payments back to back don't show up, all hell's breaking loose, unfortunately. So I am an advocate of competing currencies, like you were alluding to and you spoke of. And I'm not wanting to boycott the Federal Reserve Bank, but I'm wanting it to compete. And I'm even at, right down the street from us on Hillsborough Avenue here in Tampa is the Seminole Tribe. They run a casino. And, I've talked to my local representatives in the state of Florida saying, we need to have a plan in place so that Main Street can still contract business when the Federal Reserve blows up, figuratively speaking. We need to have, golden coin being transacted on Main Street here in Tampa, Florida, and no better place than having a foreign nation called the Seminole Tribe, start coining that. The state of Florida can write laws to get that going, so that when this collapse does occur, we got a transition plan. We're still able to go buy gasoline and buy bread because we're walking around with Seminole poker chips or Seminole silver in our pocket. I don't want to bemoan you too much on this, so. What we're talking about is secession, from the central government down, which is not typically the way it's done. You're really talking about electing Adam KoKesh as president to free all of our 50 states and territories from the central government. A little different than secession.
So if I may on that real quick, I say that the federal government's going to end one way or another. It's not going to last forever. We know that. It's either going to end, categorically. It could be aliens, it could be nuclear war, sure. But, realistic possibilities here, there's kind of three. And one is a collapse. And we want to avoid that. And a big part of this message is, hey, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. The hard way is keep your head buried in the sand and hope that government spares you in its violent death throes as it desperately clings to power. The easy way is to apply a solution as big as the problem. And it's really amazing to see how many people are ready for this, that they want to hear this. And in terms of if it's a widespread secession movement, just to finish the thought, because they're ready for this, they know that this collapse is something that's worth looking ahead to and avoiding. And that's one of the reasons the secession is kind of a big deal right now. So it might be that the federal government ends by 50 states seceding at the same time. And while that might be an immediate benefit for the states that leave sooner, it's going to create a messier process, and it's going to be less fair. I want everybody who's been stolen from by the federal government to have a claim to get some of that back. If your state secedes by yourself, you might not get your share of the liquidated assets of the federal government. So I think there's a huge advantage in that. But timing, to go back to what you brought up earlier, let's imagine there is no black swan moment. Let's imagine the checks never fail. That they have the best mathematicians money can buy, literally, that they're able to continue this growth of government in a relatively steady way. I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen, but it's a possibility that we have to look at. And even if that's the case, the way that people are waking up, and I suppose waking up is an imprecise analogy, but realizing that they're libertarians is, you don't wake up and go back to sleep. You don't unlearn what you have learned. And if we just in 2020, like I said, we're running to win and we will be ready to win. But if in 2020 we just plant the flag on this idea in the national consciousness indelibly, that you had the opportunity to vote nobody for president in 2020, we're going to be able to build that momentum going into 24. And I think 24 is when we would be competitive. And if the federal government still exists in 28, I can't imagine us not having an overwhelming, clear public mandate to dismantle the federal government by then. And regardless, I will continue to run until the federal government ceases to exist one way or another.
Oh boy. So I hear you, man, loud and clear. I don't want to take us too far off tracks, but I just can't prevent myself from doing so. Venezuela. We have, I think I want to say 75,000 people from Venezuela living in the Tampa Bay area, which makes up basically like 2 counties. That might be a little bit high on the number, but regarding the term referendum, I'm not sure if you're tracking this too closely, but Maduro, yeah, that's his name, the dictator of Venezuela, he was going to undo the Constitution and formally rewrite it and remove all the representatives of the people. And about 2 weeks before that dictator was to make that decision, a bunch of activists, kind of like ourselves, ran a worldwide referendum for people who could prove that they were from Venezuela, who are basically refugees or immigrants someplace else, no longer living in Venezuela, as well as the people in Venezuela, to vote on a series of 3 questions. But it was basically, we want to keep this Constitution in place, and we want to have an election for who's going to be our president. We're basically against the dictator taking over and removing our representatives, and we are specifically saying we want the military to step in and restore order. That was the nature of their vote. Now, I don't know if you were tracking this, but this was a beautiful activist activity worldwide, because they were able to get the press on board and basically have a week worth of press for their cause. Of course, things didn't go their way. The dictator stepped up. He removed all these representatives, and they're heading straight into socialist Marxist hell as fast as they could possibly go.
Yep.
Had you considered something along those lines, other than yourself as a candidate? Have you considered doing basically there's so many ways to vote now, not just through the government. I think one's called Pollmole, Pollmole, a smartphone app. Have you considered doing other styles of referendum about trying to get the people's desires heard?
Well, one of the ways that we're going to be tracking the progress of this campaign once we get to the next level of organization is to be having regular national polls. Would America be better off without the federal government? And be working to build that and track that over time. And one way or another, that's the most important thing. And I think you're right to point out that the mechanism is secondary to the administrative shift that we want to see happen, and secondary to what happens when you have a clear public consensus that is irrefutable. The problem is that right now, that's how government in the United States asserts its mandate. We have consensus, we had an election, so if you want to take that away, you have to take away that mandate. And I think the United States presidential electoral process is the clearest, easiest way to do this. And it's really how the American people see the federal government. Of course, we are generally taught in school still a little bit about how the government works, that there are 3 branches in the United States federal government: executive, legislative, and judicial. Yeah, I'm like forgetting my own. I feel that must have been my now I'm forgetting the guy's name from the Texas governor who was trying to eliminate, Rick Perry. I'm going to only eliminate 3 agencies of the federal government: energy and education. And what's the other one, Ron Paul? Yeah, that guy. But no, so we have this concept in the United States that's how national policy is determined. And if we can say clearly, absolutely, that the American people, when they were given a choice of a Republican for president, a Democrat for president, or no one for president, they voted no one. And that means that no one will be able to walk into that office and say, screw you, I'm still the president. And this comes a little bit from, strategically, my understanding of American history. Most people don't know this until they, or realize the implications of this until they think through it. The first American presidential election, less than 2% of the population voted. And They didn't go, oh, shucks, we don't have a mandate. I guess we can't be government. I guess we just got to go home. No, they said, screw you, we're the government anyway. And that was enough at the time for the government to form and have the support of the cops and soldiers, the enforcement class, that made it necessary to force their policies on the people. This is how we do the equivalent of that in the modern day, of removing that consent. If there was a way that the American people were more familiar with, that was more accessible, if there really was a national referendum mechanism, I think that might be the way to pursue it. But there really isn't one. So the clearest way, the easiest and most direct way to establish the authority to carry out what I'm suggesting, as well as to establish an irrefutable consensus among the American people, is through the American presidential election process.
All right, I think it's a great argument because you know, as with running comes all this free media, and your mission is obviously to get the message out. So you know,
no, my mission is to dissolve the federal government of the United States of America.
Well, if it was a two-headed mission, one's definitely going to get accomplished. And the second part's going to take a hell of a lot of work on your part.
Well, actually, the thing is, we're not going to wake everybody up. Like I said about communism, you know, it's not going to happen. It's actually, I mean, are we going to wake everybody up to libertarianism? I think we'll get to whatever the necessary critical mass is eventually. Are we going to be able to establish a national consensus for dissolving the federal government before it collapses? Maybe. Is the federal government going to last forever? Absolutely not. And therefore, humanity wins, and we win, and humanity marches on.
Hopefully, yes. All right, so I was going to transition to the second topic. I know you, people like you and I could go on and this, and I applaud you for that. And that's why you guys should come out to see Adam when he's in town here, Florida, state of Florida. I'll go through the dates real quick. I think I have them in front of me. Let's see, it's Arlington. You're going to be in Jacksonville, Florida, October 20th.
Yep.
Orlando, Florida on the 21st. Miami for a volunteer chess tournament on the 22nd. And it looks like Miami also on the 23rd for a speaking engagement. You'll be coming to my hometown here in Tampa, Florida on the 24th of October. And then it says Gainsville, Florida on the 25th. And I think maybe your Pensacola turned into Tallahassee maybe with your Lauren Sutherland.
Yeah, that's going to be 28 in Tallahassee, Florida State University.
I got 26 listed here, and 28th you're in New Orleans. I think it might be 28th still, or
that's changing. No, I got to update the website. We just got booked a couple days ago, and we're rearranging our events in New Orleans and the last part of Florida to accommodate this debate. But the timing worked out pretty well.
We actually have a Turn to Liberty New Orleans list. So if you guys are out in New Orleans, jump on turntoliberty.com's list, because we're going to be out that way again in I think it's May, whenever that convention's going to be out there. Second topic, sir. Taxation is theft.
Oh, wait, hold on. I got to know this one. It's July 1 to 3, New Orleans, next year, the 2018 Libertarian National Convention. We are encouraging everybody who supports this message to get out, to get involved, to defend the brand of the Libertarian Party, because right now, the only other person who we know who's organizing for 2020 is Bill Weld. And I know a lot of you really, even if you don't care about politics, you really don't want to see Bill Weld on the national stage with a Libertarian L next to his name in any capacity. So start showing up to meetings. Start taking charge. The Libertarian Party is whatever you make of it. I've never heard a single complaint about the Libertarian Party that wouldn't be solved by the person complaining showing up and doing something about it. So get involved, be active, and get ready to be a delegate for 2018, because in order to lay the groundwork for 2020, there are 3 critical things that we want to achieve at the 2018 convention. And one of them is to introduce decentralization or localization as part of the national platform, to say specifically that as libertarians, rather than our ideal policy being imposed on an entire area, we prefer that that decision be made at the more local level, that we'd rather have that pushed down to the community level as much as possible. 2, because we've done this, we get to make a unity statement similar to the Dallas Accords of 1974, but this time it's not just about uniting the splinter groups of libertarians, so that we can stop being a debate club and start being a political force, but specifically to tell the American people, the Libertarian Party, we welcome conservatives, we welcome liberals, we welcome moderates. If you want to move in the direction of freedom through localization of government, then we want you on our team. You are on the right side of the line in the sand, and we want you to be a part of the Libertarian Party. And finally, we want the headline at the end of the convention to be that libertarians have taken over the Libertarian Party. We are coming forth with practical policy that immediately makes everyone's life better, brings people together. We are ready to unite America, left, right, and center, against the common enemy of big centralized government.
Amen to that. So Dallas Accord update or Dallas Accord deletion?
No, Dallas Accord 2.0.
2.0, okay. Now, I got a question. I didn't hear the word constitutionalists are invited. What's your
Well, of course.
That one?
Well, see, now being a constitutionalist is different from being a nationalist. If you're a constitutionalist, it means you believe that a country, whether it's the United States or Virginia or Spain or whatever, should have a form of government based on a constitution that has checks and balances and the various features of a constitution. If you're like the American founders, or rather the framers who were against the freedom that the founders fought for, the people who created that central government, that stronger authority under the Constitution, I would say that the people who wrote the Constitution in many ways betrayed the people who fought and died for American independence by creating the new central authority that was to become the world's biggest empire. But the Constitution was written at the time for a population smaller than almost any state that we have in the Union today. So you can be a constitutionalist and still be a localist or a libertarian if you want that system to be voluntary. And if you are a constitutionalist, I would say that the only way that you can have an ethical constitutional government with a social contract, as it were, is if everybody is participating voluntarily. You can't force a contract on someone. So, yeah, absolutely. Constitutionalists are definitely welcome in this. Socialists, communists, minarchists, alt-righters, people who want to move in the direction of freedom. Like I said, this is the everybody gets what they want strategy. You want your community to look like this or like that. You can't have that when we force everybody into the same system, but we can be united in our diversity, in our aesthetic preferences for how we want our communities organized when we stand together for localization of government.
All right, so I'm on board for the direction here. It's bottoms-up approach, so to speak. Big decisions happen with your local representative right down the block. Less important, next level up. The people maybe at the state capital, and basically we don't need another layer. We don't need a centralized government nationwide. So I can understand that, and I the philosophies, the socialists, the Marxists, I can't see them fitting yet, but I applaud you for trying, because there's hope. People can learn new stuff. There's plenty of examples of failed socialism globally. I want to switch topics on you real quick, unless you want to say anything else on this.
No, please. Taxation
is theft. I see that on your website. Isn't it really technically legal extortion? Haven't we really basically just got a monopoly on the mob, being the government, to continue to steal from us?
Yep, that's it. And I would go. I mean, you get it. It's kind of an irrefutable truth. I'll just say that it's a beautiful thing that we have made taxation is theft this prominent hashtag, this rallying cry, because it really does speak to the core of the ethical nature of our philosophy. But if I may, I want to share an experience I had where I was triggered recently. I know, it takes a lot to trigger me, but it was at a conference in Malta, the Corax conference, and Mr. Liechtenstein, Andreas Kohl, in his speech said that libertarians should be agnostic about taxes and regulations. And I was like, whoa, no. How can you tell me that taxation is theft? But what he meant was that in terms of how we achieve the libertarian social order, where there is no institutional theft, is to not argue with people over what governments should do or not do, but rather on what geographic scale. So if this suggests a totally different approach to libertarian outreach that really focuses not on our aesthetic preferences that are prescribed by our philosophy, but by the nature of voluntarism, which is more, I think, at the heart of this philosophy. So when someone comes to you and says, I think government should do X, the typical libertarian response is, you're wrong, let me prove it to you and argue with you and tell you why that's bad. And you've already lost. You might win a battle, but you've lost. You're losing the war because you've missed the opportunity to share the ideas that are valuable to you with someone in a motivating, inspirational, loving, positive way. So what I would suggest is if someone comes to you and says, I think government should do X, you say, okay, so you want this because you want this to be achieved. Okay, cool. So would you be okay with government doing X just at the local level in your community? Would you be okay with the government doing X in a way that no one is forced into this system, that all the participation is voluntary? Are you okay with when you have this in your community that you don't start an army to force your policy on your neighboring community? Okay, then you're a libertarian, because almost everybody answers yes to those questions when you put them in the right way. And that approach is how we unite, again, left, right, and center. We bring them to this philosophy, we bring this to this message without saying you're wrong, without challenging their worldview, but by saying, look, we have a way for you to get what you want peacefully as an alternative to how it's happening violently, coercively through the government today.
And I applaud you for practicing being able to speak to people from the opposite opinion in a professional way, because that's something I really need to work on. I know Jim Bobka from Zero Aggression Principle, I think it's his website, and also Downsize DC came out and spoke to us really on how to do that conversation, and that's a whole hour's worth of work, just to get the details on how to cope with people that. So if I could bottle it up here, I would say, in a sense, any law is fine as long as we can opt out, as long as there's an option for people to participate or not participate, especially with some kind of government project that's going to require financing from the people in the form of, I'll say the word tax. It technically would not be extortion if there's an opt out. So if
exactly.
And that could be as simple as that. It's whatever you guys want, as long as people have the option to opt out and aren't required to participate in your government program. And that's not the case right now. It's literally at gunpoint. Down here you don't pay taxes for 3 years. Your house is up for auction. If you don't move out of the house once somebody else buys it, of course, the sheriff's department shows up with their guns and moves you out. And that's all because we've created this mess. Our forefathers have created this mess. And interesting strategy, Mr. Adam KoKesh, for delinking the biggest mess of all, which is central government USA in District of Columbia, from continuing this tyrannical raid of our earnings, our property, and our legacy to our children. If we could shut that spigot off, we're going to be a lot better off. And I applaud you, sir, for carrying that message. You got a little bit of a road in front of you. You got about 3 years almost to carry this message. Are you up for the challenge? Do you have?
Oh yeah. Well, I've been a full-time activist for over 10 years now, and it feels as if this is the big solution that I've been awkwardly groping towards. And again, it's really not about me. It's about this specific platform. And I just happen to be in a position now, having fallen over backwards into this by dumb luck, a series of bad decisions and poor judgment that got me to this point where I'm at today, running for not president, or rather running on the platform of dissolving the entire federal government. And this is an idea whose time has come. So with or without me, just to be alive right now, to get to sit at the forefront of human history, to watch it unfold, to be a player in it, to get to, you know, I don't think as individuals we really get to change the forces of nature that drive the human experience, but we do get to decide what side we're going to be pulling on, and we do get to help shape the face of human destiny. And where we are right now in the United States, with the opportunity to fulfill the promise of the first American Revolution, to once again lead the world forward in freedom, is just such an incredible opportunity. I can't imagine doing anything else right now.
Wash away tyranny, open up markets, produce competitive currencies, you know, and allow the inspiration and ingenuity of our own people here in the United States or in America. I don't know if you want to rename the place, but allow the ingenuity of our own people to come up with solutions. Stop looking for a central government to create another racket or monopoly or a closed market to provide whatever service people are wanting to do. All right, sir. Adam KoKesh, he's coming to Florida, guys. Don't miss it. We'll have links to his date, back to his website, thefreedomline.com, thefreedomline.com. You got any parting words for the audience, Adam?
Well, I'll just say thank you so much, brother. I really appreciate it, and the help with this tour. It's amazing to get out and talk to people. And I will just share one last sort of story here about this tour. And it's really about all the tours that I've done that allow me to step outside of the bubbles of libertarianism. And one of them is, you know, the internet bubble that we create for ourselves. The other one is when we come together in events and we pat each other on the back for being right about everything, and then we end up debating about how wrong we are about everything and calling each other a bunch of socialists by the end of the night. You know, but then on this tour, I drive around, you know, in a vehicle that has the freedom logo on it in big letters, and people at gas stations will stop and say, "What's freedom?" And I say, "Oh, it's this book that I wrote when I was in jail for civil disobedience. It's about how we create a more peaceful, productive, and harmonious world by dissolving government altogether." And most of them go, yeah, sounds like a good idea. And they say, "Well, what are you doing about it?" And I say, "Well, aside from this book tour, I'm getting ready to run for president in 2020 on the platform of dissolving the entire federal government." And they go, "Yeah, sounds like a good start." And when you present this message properly, you make your intentions clear, you stay in that love that motivates all of us as activists, then you're going to find that people are very receptive to this message, that everyone is a libertarian. They just haven't realized it yet. And we really can bring people together around universal human values that the government status quo stands against.
Outstanding. Again, I applaud you, sir. That's why I'm jumping on board early, trying to get the word out for you, because you know, you definitely opened up my mind a couple years back when you came to Pinellas County, which was the first place I saw you. I think it was 2016, maybe early in the year. Mm-hmm. And yeah, and there's so many people that need to be woken up. So, sir, thanks. Adam KoKesh, thefreedomline.com, and you guys in the audience, jump on board, jump on his website, jump on his list. Jump on our list, turntoliberty.com, turntoliberty.com. We're doing events, we're doing trainings. Adam's a walking activist trainer, and there's just so much to learn and so much to do. So people, thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch up with you guys later on. God bless.
Thank you, brother.
All right, Adam.
Just give me liberty, or give me